I have to give an historic perspective of the EU policy, so I will try to stick to my mandate. From the entry into force of the Maastricht Treaty, the EU started to develop its security policy, dealing with all kinds of security issues, including non-proliferation and disarmament. It was clear that only through a considerable investment in the security field, the EU would acquire a credibility as a political actor on the international scene. However, the beginning was difficult. Member states, and in particular their foreign affairs ministries, regarded security issues as their national prerogatives. We could not speak about coordination in view of meetings of export control regimes. We could only refer to voluntary information sharing and contributions. Very quickly, however, everybody realized the potential of acting as the EU. The first joint action was adopted in 1994 in support of a ban of anti-personnel landmines, and another one in 1995 before the NPT review conference in support of the indefinite extension of the NPT. But the EU was not yet a major player. The Iraq crisis obliged the European leaders to reflect on the reasons for the division and on the ways which could minimize the risks of new divisions in the future. A thorough reflection conducted in the European Council and in the Council of Foreign Affairs Ministers led to the unanimous conclusion that the EU should invest much more on preventing proliferation crises, should become a major actor in the non-proliferation field, and should consistently include a non-proliferation dimension in its foreign policy and in its relations with third countries. A strategy, which is the highest instrument in the EU hierarchy of acts, was adopted by the European Council in December 2003. And the High Representative Javier Solana decided in October 2003 to appoint a personal representative with a mandate to coordinate, help implement, and further develop the EU WMD strategy and give sharper focus to these issues in the dialogue with third countries. How has the strategy been translated into action? One of the main guidelines of the WMD strategy, as well as of the security strategy, which was adopted by the European Council in parallel, is the support to effective multilateralism. The EU has developed a series of initiatives in support of the NPT, the Additional Protocol, the Chemical Weapons Convention, the Biological Weapons Convention, CTBT, the UN Programme of Action on Small Arms, the Hague Code of Conduct, and the Ottawa Convention. These joint actions and Council decisions imply both a political support to the multilateral instruments and a financial support to the international agencies in charge of their verification. The objectives are the promotion of universality, the promotion of full compliance with the obligations under these treaties, and generally enhancing the credibility of the multilateral regime. Through these joint actions and Council decisions, the EU has made a considerable contribution to preventing proliferation by expanding the implementation of international norms, by securing sensitive materials and sensitive facilities, enhancing national capabilities in the area of border controls and against illicit trafficking, and also through the redirection of former WMD scientists to peaceful activities. The role of the EU in the field of prevention has been clearly recognized by the invitation addressed to the EU to join the G8 deliberations on non-proliferation and the Nuclear Security Summit. EU member states have also tried to increase the weight of the EU in the decision-making process of international meetings, and in particular in the review conferences of the multilateral instruments. This has been done through the adoption by the Council of common positions, setting the line to be held by member states in advance of multilateral meetings. This approach has only been a partial success. Many third countries view the EU common positions as preventing a real negotiation. On the other hand, member states interpret common positions as the smallest common denominator, which does not prevent member states from taking nationally stricter positions or from making national proposals on aspects not covered by the common positions. Whilst this interpretation is legally correct, it is clear that seeing France or Ireland, UK or Sweden negotiating independently in the context of review conferences does not contribute to the EU credibility. But the EU has also scored very good results. The relevance of certain multilateral instruments has been salvaged by the EU. This is the case for the Biological Weapons Convention and the Hague Code of Conduct. The EU contribution on the WMD-free zone in the Middle East has been important in the NPT context. The EU has launched an innovative initiative on security of space, which, if realized, will fill a gap and will demonstrate that the EU can exercise leadership on certain issues. The EU contribution to the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1540 is crucial in convincing developing countries that proliferation is not or should not be a concern exclusively for Western countries, and they have an interest in fighting proliferation through the implementation of 1540. We have negotiated joint declarations and action plans with some countries, including China and Japan. At nearly every EU-US summit, there is a joint declaration on non-proliferation setting our common goals. The EU has developed a dialogue with a number of third countries, in particular developing countries, not only in the context of regional seminars organized in the context of the joint actions, but also in the context of negotiations and follow-up to the WMD clause. Contrary to what is said by those who look at this clause as an obstacle, the negotiation of a WMD clause has very often offered an opportunity to discuss with the national authorities of the other country its concerns and its weaknesses, and to envisage then tailor-made cooperation programs. The WMD clause has played an important role in conveying to our partners the image of an EU which plays a role in political and security affairs. Finally, but not least, the EU has set up a European network of non-proliferation think tanks, which, with its research and discussions, will enlighten the EU High Representative and the EU institutions in their decision-making process. It is fully consistent with the prevention approach outlined in the strategy that the EU has been involved in the diplomatic efforts towards Iran. It is very interesting to note that the EU E3 decided in '94 to associate the High Representative with their initiative, and that later the High Representative was entrusted with the role of speaker, not only by the E3, but also by US, Russia, and China. Of course, everybody understands that using the EU High Representative in this context was convenient from many viewpoints. The Americans would feel comfortable since this would spare them the need for being exposed directly. We were under the Bush administration. The Russians and Chinese would feel more comfortable with an EU leadership than with an American leadership. The E3 could be sure that important elements needed in the package proposals to be offered to Iran could be delivered. But it remains that, for whatever reasons, there has been an important recognition that the EU could play a role. And we should not also forget that the EU has developed a policy and a number of concrete initiatives in the area of conventional weapons. In the field of conventional weapons, As a whole category, the EU has been at the forefront in promoting the negotiations of an arms trade treaty within the UN system, coordinating the positions of the member states, but also promoting the ATT vis-à-vis a vast array of countries. Over the past 15 years, the EU has established one of the most stringent standards to regulate conventional arms exports through the adoption in 1994 of a code of conduct, which has been replaced in 2008 by a legally binding common position. Small arms and light weapons is also an area where the EU has been very active, both in its foreign and security policy and in the context of its development assistance. And there is a specific strategy which was adopted in December 2005 by the European Council. But also here, we cannot hide that divisions among member states are detrimental to the EU credibility. The situation on cluster munitions is an example of lack of coherence, which can damage the EU image. The fact that the WMD strategy refers in the title to non-proliferation only does not mean that the EU action is limited to non-proliferation and that disarmament is neglected. On the contrary, the EU is always supporting all the obligations deriving from the multilateral instruments in a balanced way and has funded also a number of projects contributing to dismantlement of weapons, both in the chemical and in the nuclear field. And this is also the case in the area of small arms and light weapons. So summing up, I believe that we can confidently say that from the EU point of view, the implementation of the WMD strategy and of the SALV strategy have allowed the EU to acquire a status on the international scene as a political actor. And I would say from the international point of view, we could say that the multilateral regime has benefited from the action of the EU. I know that my colleagues will speak about the future challenges and the future developments, but I would very briefly make 2 or 3 points about the problems that we face at this stage. In my opinion, there is too much debate about the status of the EU in international fora, about who should take the floor, etc. Member states and maybe some EU institutions are focusing too much on this issue instead of focusing their attention on the advantage in substance of having a strong EU with a united voice. The External Action Service does not seem to take full advantage of the new treaty and of the new structures. The focus now seems to be not on the political initiative of the EU, but rather on assistance programs and on financial instruments. Assistance programs can only achieve good results if they are carried out in the context of a political cooperation. And the EU now should focus on including non-proliferation in its strategic plans in the follow-up to the Arab Spring. The EU should also reflect on how to contribute or continue to contribute on 2 main outstanding issues, Middle East and South Asia. Middle East is crucially important, and I am of the opinion that it is impossible to find a final solution to the Iranian case without launching a real process on the WMD-free zone in the Middle East, and I would like to know whether there is any follow-up to the seminar we had last July in Brussels. For the second one, we should pay attention to any involution tendency. Developing trade ties with countries while ignoring security concerns and ignoring concern of discrimination vis-à-vis countries which are party to multilateral non-proliferation instruments would no doubt convey to the world the perception of a European Union exclusively focusing on its economic dimension. This would be a real setback with respect to all the efforts undertaken from Maastricht on. And in addition to being negative from the point of view of the European integration process, this would not be an advantage for the stability of non-proliferation regime and not be an advantage for international security. The External Action Service should allocate to non-proliferation disarmament the necessary human resources, including the appointment of a high-level official who could have the authority of sitting with his or her counterparts, and proliferation and disarmament issues should be among the issues on the agenda of EU meetings with third countries at all levels, including ministerial and summit meetings, because any work or initiative carried out by EU experts will not bear fruits if the importance of non-proliferation objectives is not stressed by the EU leaders with their counterparts. Thank you.